We are so honored to have with us today two leaders who have been at the forefront of the building and the development of the nation's clean energy ecosystem. Two women who need no introduction, the Chair and CEO of General Motors, Mary Barra, and Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm. We have heard from both of them consistent messages about their commitment to battling climate change, and their organizations have followed this vision with innovative science and technology, policy, and market strategy. They've joined us today to talk about this vision for decarbonizing the economy, which is the impetus for this two-day Energy Storage Summit. So let's kick this off. The last year has seen inspiring announcements from GM, like the goal by 2035 for all new cars, SUVs, and light pickup trucks sold to be zero emission, and announcements out of the Biden-Harris administration and the Department of Energy on decarbonization. I'd really love to hear more about these and your driving motivations.
Well, at General Motors, our vision for the future is to create a world with zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. And as you said, we have a goal to become carbon neutral by 2040, and we're working to get all of our new light-duty vehicles to be electric by 2035 or sooner. And we're also working on solutions for heavy-duty vehicles. And we're making the necessary investments, not only in vehicle programs, but also in the battery cell capacity that we need to power these electric vehicles. So it's a pretty exciting time right now. And, from a General Motors perspective, we feel a responsibility to create this better future for generations to come and to really make sure this transformation includes everyone.
I love this. I love hearing you talk about it, Mary. And I say this because I was governor of Michigan during the time when the auto industry was on its knees, and when the industry was in bankruptcy, the suppliers were all in bankruptcy, and the question was, are we going to have a manufacturing backbone in the U.S.? Are we going to have an auto industry going forward during that Great Recession? And it's funny because it was then Vice President Biden who came to us in the governor's office after, of course, the restructuring happened and the loans to the auto industry, which were all paid back, by the way. But in terms of diversifying and what you're talking about, your aspirations for this clean energy future and electrification. Well, it was, of course, Joe Biden as vice president and the Obama-Biden administration that gave to Michigan and to GM and to other private sector players the opportunity to diversify into electrification, into batteries. And that, I think, was really the basis for what we're seeing now. It's really awesome to see. So the president, of course, President Biden, took office knowing that we're running out of time to meet the climate change. We've seen this past year of these climate supercharged natural disasters. We paid, as a nation, we spent $145 billion last year cleaning up after these extreme weather events. So, the urgency around that transition, I think, has only really deepened, frankly, in light of what Vladimir Putin is doing, in light of his willingness to use fossil energy as a geopolitical weapon in his unacceptable war on Ukraine. So with that as a backdrop, I just know there's just huge opportunity here. The global market for clean energy technologies is going to reach $23 trillion by 2030, and the administration wants America leading that market. And we love our American OEMs to be able to lead the electrification of the transportation sector. The president's got this big goal. Your goal is actually even more ambitious. He wants to get to net zero by 2050. You want to get there by 2040. He wants to cut emissions in half by 2030 and then reach 100% clean electricity by 2035. So lots to do, lots to deploy. Our mantra here at the Department of Energy is deploy, deploy, deploy clean energy solutions. So we're very, very excited about that and about the way the private sector is stepping up.
Well, let's talk about how we're going to get there. The automotive industry is very dynamic. What are some of the challenges the industry and our country need to overcome to reach these electrification goals?
Well, I think, for the long term and for the success and to achieve our goals, we really need to make sure that we have a secure, sustainable, and scalable supply chain that's also cost competitive, because it's really the auto industry is definitely global in nature. But we see a huge opportunity to bring more of our manufacturing to this country. And one of our great advantages that I see at GM is we have a well-trained workforce that knows how to safely build high quality vehicles. And so it was I think a quick decision when we looked at the number of battery cells we're going to need and how do we make sure we have the ability to do that, because that's really what's going to, I think, really allow EVs to grow quickly is as we continue to make the technology better and more affordable. So we're not only going to, in a joint venture with LG Energy Solution, build battery cells, and we'll be building 4 plants in the United States. We're also working to make sure the whole supply chain that's necessary for EVs is stable, that we have enough supply, and in many cases that it's in North America. So very, very important steps in getting that, to get somewhere you want to go in 10 years, you've got to be building that supply chain now. I would say the other thing that we've worked on over the last 3 or 4 years, and we just launched it late last year, is our Ultium platform. And that gives us the ability to do a number of vehicles off of this platform, and we can get the scale, and that also will, I think, accelerate the adoption of EVs. So, when we look at, the work that we need to get done, as a company, we're doing our part. And then we're working with the government and we're working with other companies because the charging infrastructure is very, very important as well. Consumers tell us they're willing to consider an electric vehicle, but not only do they want about 300 miles of range or more than 300 miles, they want a vehicle in the segment that they need for their life, the functionality that they need, but they also want to make sure there's a robust charging infrastructure. So that's one of the key things that we need to work on to drive this adoption.
The bipartisan infrastructure law that the president signed in allows us to build out that charging infrastructure. Many states are already doing that, but on average, states are getting about $100 million per state, something around there, depending on the size of the state, but just a huge amount of money going in to fill in the gaps of that charging infrastructure. So that's one piece that's super important. And then a second piece that's super important that Mary referred to is the supply chain issues, particularly around batteries. I mean, we rely on imports now for the guts of those batteries, and we get a big chunk of those imports from our economic competitors, which means the reliance on that creates risk. And so President Biden really is focused on this supply chain issue. When I was governor of Michigan, and Mary, I know you, and living in Michigan and working at GM, we saw so many of the suppliers, so much of the supply chain go overseas where it was cheaper to manufacture. And the president has said, look, those countries have an economic strategy to make it competitive for them to locate in their country. And we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it in a uniquely American way. We're not going to have state-owned enterprises. We're going to partner with the private sector to make it worth their while to locate here. And so, he issued last year an executive order that directed a whole of government response to this supply chain issue. And so a couple of weeks ago, DOE put out a blueprint for building up, for example, a lithium battery industrial base in America. And we followed that up with the release of our first ever industrial strategy for each of the 13 segments of the clean energy sector overall. And obviously part of the battery challenge has been the fact that we have sourced much of the raw materials, the critical minerals, the critical materials for batteries elsewhere. And so figuring out how to sustainably extract critical minerals in the United States, figuring out how we get them processed. We don't have any processing in the United States. How do we do that in a cost-effective and sustainable way? Those issues are really, really important for us. It's so exciting to see that so many of the OEMs have committed to building out batteries, not just assembling them, not just putting the modules together, but actually building out the cells for the batteries and the guts to that, the anode, the cathode, the separator material, the electrolyte, all of that, the full supply chain, including the critical minerals like lithium and cobalt, et cetera. In the United States, it's just a really exciting moment. Let me just say one other thing, which is it does depend on workers, American workers, to bring that to life. And that's why the president wants to see a robust manufacturing sector in the US, because it means jobs in all pockets of the country, good paying jobs. He's very supportive of union jobs. And that is a huge opportunity for the growth of family sustaining wages across the nation.
Secretary Granholm, I was really encouraged to hear you mention infrastructure, and I'm really excited about this new joint office between DOE and the Department of Transportation for Energy and Transportation. That joint office is going to be really powerful and help us deploy. And this theme you mentioned of supply chain, both of you, it's just really critical. In fact, we've built out the summit's day one agenda around this supply chain theme of bringing battery production to the US in a really big way, from resource all the way to recharge. But let's double click on our national resources. Let's talk about our people, our talented workforce, which you both mentioned. How will this battery revolution in the US be powered by a national workforce? And what kind of workforce opportunities will this open up?
I do think the workforce, and I'm very proud of the good paying jobs the automotive industry provides for people. It really, the auto industry built the middle class, and we continue to have very talented people at all levels of assembly. And frankly, we not only want to make sure there's a place for every single one of the GM team members as we make this transformation to electric vehicles, but also create new jobs with the production, as Secretary Granholm mentioned, that we're bringing into this country that has been done somewhere else in the past. And when I talk to our workforce and go meet team members on the plant floor today, they can't wait until they're building either a component for electric vehicles or electric vehicles themselves, because they know it's our future. So it's a pretty exciting time. And to get that workforce ready, we have developed training programs of what's different when you're building an electric vehicle instead of an internal combustion engine vehicle. What training do we need to have? And we actually have a training center at our campus in Warren, Michigan, where people go and not only learn from a technical perspective, but then get hands-on training to make sure they're going to be ready to build these vehicles safely.
Yeah, I just think this cannot be overstated, is that this vision of having a supply chain in the United States really depends on on a skilled workforce, and making sure we've got the strategies to upskill workers, and for not just batteries, but for really this whole array of supply chain opportunities. Just one example that's not related to batteries. I mean, we want to put clean energy on the transmission grid. We do not even make in the United States the transformers for the transmission grid, another supply chain gap. We've got to build up the skill set of people to be able to manufacture them and install them. And that's true with batteries as well. The president in having us do all of these supply chain analyses and identifying the gaps. I mean, you heard the president during the State of the Union last week. He says specifically he wants to see this country making things again, right here at home, using American parts and American labor. And the administration is willing to co-invest in that manufacturing capacity and our workforce to make it happen. So there is just enormous potential to be, creating good paying jobs in this battery revolution. And, the Department of Energy, just quickly as an example, we're working on this range of new methods for extracting responsibly critical materials, from new mining techniques to upcycling coal waste to lithium from geothermal brines, for example. The techniques themselves could really create massive opportunities for mining and for coal power communities, which are communities that have felt left behind in this transition, and they've powered our nation for the past 100 years. We want them to power our nation for the next 100 years, but clean, right? So it's about economic security, but I will say it's also about national security as well for our workers across the country.
So let's stick to this theme of people. I'd love to talk about energy justice. I know you're both tireless champions for equity. Could you share more about your efforts to make this battery revolution a positive impact for all?
Yeah, we know that climate change does not impact every community equally. And so as we move to an all-electric zero-emissions future, we need to make sure that we implement solutions that allow everyone to be part of it. And it starts with our vehicle portfolio. We have announced that Next year, we'll have an Equinox EV from Chevrolet that will be about $30,000. And that starts for new car buyers. That gets into the sweet spot. And so we're also working on a vehicle that will be even more affordable, that will come out a little bit later. So making the vehicles obtainable, and also, from a used EV perspective, because that's an even bigger market. So making sure there's a robust used market as we move forward. And then I think charging is really important, because again, our customer research says people tell us that the place that they most like to charge is in their garage, but we need to make sure there's a robust charging infrastructure for people who may live in an apartment that don't even have assigned parking. And that's where, what happened in the bipartisan infrastructure bill is so important. And GM itself, we're investing over $750 million to expand charging, not only in the workplace, but public charging, and also offer people opportunities for their homes. So the charging infrastructure is so important that it's done in a way that everyone can feel comfortable and trust that an EV is the best vehicle for them.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. And I mean, it's really one of the reasons why the president was so committed to making the charging infrastructure accessible, particularly in areas where there hasn't yet been a great penetration of electric vehicles, perhaps because maybe they're low income, maybe it's rural, maybe the private sector charging companies haven't found it in their best interest to put a charger in a place where there hasn't been a huge uptake in EVs yet. So that's where the government comes in. And he really wants to make sure that we build out this national network. And it's $7.5 billion. That is a significant opportunity. We just put out guidance from the Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation in a joint office. And so we'll be getting back the state's proposals for how they plan to lay out their charging network by the beginning of the summer. And hopefully by the end of the summer, the money should start to flow and you'll start to see those chargers appearing all over the country. I do want to say you started out by talking about equity, really. And equity is this administration's North Star. It's why the Justice 40 initiative is the sort of the beating heart of the president's agenda. That means that we want to see, our goal is to put communities that have been left behind at the front of the line for the benefits of clean energy. And so that means 40% of the benefits from the clean energy investments in that bipartisan infrastructure law should flow to those communities. So we're going to, as we decide on where to award grants and to direct funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law, we're going to be taking priorities like advancing equity and mitigating, of course, climate impacts into account. So let me just say one other thing is that we've, in making the awards and the funding awards, we've created new initiatives to help move the needle on storage in particular. So last September, we launched our Energy Storage for Social Equity initiative, which is to work with 15 underserved and frontline communities on developing and deploying energy storage projects, which is going to boost resilience. And I know that our national labs are in on this too, thanks to our hosts, LBNL, and all 17 of our labs are really working together to identify where the energy storage space right now falls short on equity and on environmental justice matters, and how we're going to be able to do better.
Thank you, Secretary Granholm. Okay, well, we were talking earlier about markets, but I'd love to talk about the other legs of the stool, the critical role that S&T innovation and policy will play here as well. So how is DOE thinking about the innovative capabilities, expertise, and science and technology needed to really enable the clean energy transition, including needed innovations for energy storage and its end uses?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, when it comes to innovation, with all due respect to anybody who may be listening, there are very few that can hold a candle to our 17 national labs, which are really the crown jewels of the Department of Energy. They are powerhouses in the global scientific community. And frankly, one of the reasons why this administration has the confidence to set our sights on clean energy so high. We trace many of the breakthroughs that have helped spur energy storage technology right back to the national labs. And we're going to offer those labs all the support that they need to keep pushing the envelope, whether it's through pursuing basic research or deployment. For example, we have a series of energy earth shots The labs are going to play a role in that, but for example, too, on large scale energy storage, battery storage for utilities, our goal is to reduce the cost by 90%. We have a earth shot to reduce the cost of hydrogen, of clean hydrogen as well. In that same way, we have a earth shot of reducing the cost of carbon dioxide removal. All of those big, hairy, audacious goals that we have in our energy earth shots, the labs are all playing a key role in them, including that long duration storage shot. So I appreciate the fact that the labs are really breaking boundaries in capacity and in charge times, and obviously in partnership with the private sector who's doing their own research and development and breakthroughs. It's a super exciting time to be in this space. And I will say the labs are also working to develop alternatives to materials like cobalt and nickel, which, as I was mentioning earlier, countries like China or economic competitors dominate right now. So I love the fact that the labs actually bring together players in industry and academia and policy and finance and private sector at events like this one. And speaking of, by the way, tomorrow, this summit is going to feature meetings between researchers and industry to help build partnerships that can accelerate storage innovation. I think they're called collaboration cycles. And I hope all of you who are watching take part in that.
Thank you, Secretary Granholm. Mary, I'd love to hear from you. What are ways that policy could help accelerate EV adoption?
Well, first I have to say, I love this concept of earth shots. I mean, of just, really, because, what I find, leading General Motors, when we make a clear challenge, the innovation and the creativity just is unlocked. And I agree with you that, we have so much talent in this country that we can solve these issues. And so, working together, working with the labs, with others in industry, with other institutions is very much a part of our plan, because the key is getting battery costs down and, using less of the critical minerals and materials that right now are very expensive. So we're challenging ourselves of how do we use less as we get more energy density and get the cost down overall. When I look at, what can help is investment tax credits to incentivize companies to establish battery and EV manufacturing capacity in the US, as well as build out the supply chains that we talked about earlier. Also, we already mentioned the important role that the administration is playing in building out the charging infrastructure. And then we have seen in these early days that consumer incentives do drive EV adoption. And so there are changes that need to be made, because right now with the EV incentives, first movers, we've already used all of ours. And so, to have a level playing field and encourage people to buy the vehicle they want and they still have the opportunity, we're hopeful that legislation will move forward. So I think there's a lot we can do working together. And I totally agree. This is the most exciting time. I've been in the auto industry for over 40 years. This is the most exciting time of my career.
Well, this has just been incredible. We've touched on supply chains, jobs, equity, S&T innovation, markets, and policy. So how about to wrap up, how about closing thoughts from you both? What are your bold, audacious, hairy, big picture goals for our summit audience to consider as they're sharing ideas here today? Specifically, what are we aiming for in the energy storage space in the years to come?
Okay, well, first, let me thank you for playing moderator today. Awesome stuff. And of course, thanks to my partner in conversation, Mary Barra, always a treat to share a screen with you. My proverbial hat is off to the full team at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab for pulling the summit together, really, and helping us to get the word out on the supply chain blueprint and the clean energy industrial strategy. With everything that's happening in Ukraine over the last few weeks, I've really thought a lot about what energy independence really looks like. I know our European allies are really thinking about this transition and how to accelerate it so that they are not held hostage to countries that don't have their interests at heart. And we've seen how that works out in real time. So, clean energy just really offers us a better way forward. And the only way to get closer to true energy independence, national security, is by building out the technology at home with a reliable supply chain. Nobody has ever held a country hostage over access to the sun or access to the wind, or hopefully this new technology that will allow us to harness clean energy and power our electric vehicles. So if you've read our lithium blueprint and our industrial strategy for clean energy, you know we've got our work cut out for us. But as the president likes to say, it's never a good idea to bet against the American people. We don't back away from big challenges. We rise to meet them. And that's why we have been putting forward all these big, hairy, audacious goals to meet the president's big, hairy, audacious goals. And that's what we need right here. We need to set high goals. We need to move in that direction. We can shore up our supply chain for critical minerals. We can revitalize our manufacturing backbone, and we can build things like next generation battery gigafactories that'll move us from importers to exporters. So let's get deploying.
I would say, first of all, it's really been a pleasure to be a part of this discussion, and congratulations on the summit that you're pulling together. And Secretary Granholm, thank you for all the support that you provide the industry as we are making this transformation. You've said deploy, deploy, deploy. At GM, I feel our goal right now is execute, execute, execute. We know the vehicles we want to get to market. We know, we're building battery plants. One will start building cells, manufacturing cells for production yet this year, and we have 3 more on the way. So it is let's get people into these vehicles and do it in the right way. And that's why General Motors has also announced that we actually just increased our climate equity fund to $50 million to make sure we're also making it something where we talk about EVs for everyone, and we mean it. So it's an exciting time.
Well, thank you both for laying out our national challenges and the opportunities related to electrifying mobility and decarbonizing our economy in response to the climate crisis. This has been a true honor for me and all of us here. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and for leading and taking action to tackle the most critical challenge of our time. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Wow, I can't believe that just happened. But there's so much more in store for us today, so let's get right down to it. The next session is our first panel of the day, building out a domestic lithium resource. So let me turn it over to our moderator, Dr. Michael Whitaker.